Okay, so I wanted to do a kind of brief tutorial, kind of in layman terms, to kind of go over some of the basics of lighting, but more for like people who are, maybe they're stagehands, or maybe you're a sound guy who helps with lights every once in a while and you're not 100% but you want to get a little bit better. There are a lot of tutorials about going online about where you can figure out how to program boards and all that kind of stuff, but I want to start with the basics, to kind of stuff that I wish somebody had explained to me kind of just early on, to kind of help kind of set a basis to break it down simply, if that's all right. So we're going to start with, because I have these, my own lights here, I have these, they're called up lights, right? And you turn it on, and it basically, these are the kind of lights you'll find at weddings, or you use them at weddings or corporate events, and you put them in against a column or a tree, and they just light up, and you can change different colors, and you can have different patterns and such, right? So I'm using these are basically powered by battery. You charge them up and they can go for 18 hours depending, or 12 hours, depending on what brand you have or how old they are or whatever, right? So I want to start with these and basically show you. So let's say this is gonna be our board, right? We're gonna use this as a lighting board. Like, what the hell is this? Old school kind of piece of crap. So you see all these faders and different things on here. You've probably seen them at some point on all kinds of different contraptions. So what you're going to do is, for something like this, right, you're going to take the board. Since these are powered by a battery, we're not worried about the power going into these. This is about sending data. DMX, you've heard of, maybe you've heard of, it's cable. The standard today, these are DMX, right? DMX cable is just 3-pin DMX. The standard DMX today is the 5-pin DMX. The difference is going to be, you know what, the difference, we'll go over that later. But for right now, because this board's cheap, and these lights have 3-pin on them, we're going to use that as our basic. So you're going to go from, you're going to run basically data from this board into this light, and then you're going to run a cable to the DMX in, and then from the DMX out into another light, right? So you have these two lights that you're going to be controlling with this board using DMX. Or data. Let's just call it data, because that's kind of a way to break it down. All you're doing is sending information to this light from this board, right? So since both of these lights are coming off of this one output on here, they're all on the same, you'll hear it's called a universe, okay? You might hear that a lot. How many universes do you have? It's basically how many lights are all plugged into that one line. This board only has one. Your bigger boards have 2, 3, 4, what have you, and you plug them in and you can go. So, but the question is, so when you plug them in, 2 lights to one data port, how does the board and the lights, how do you, when you turn up one, how does this one light go on and number 2? Well, you have to address them. You've heard of that, address the light, right? So every light, every intelligent light or whatever has a little menu on it. And you're going to find the address of whatever light it is and set the address. So let's say, boiling it down simplistically, let's call this light number 1 and this light number 2. So that when you turn it up on the fader, light number 1 and light number 2. Simplistic version. The trick is, so this light, for example, is well, let's simplify it and say, so it's got, let's say, how many colors it's got on it? It's got red, oops. So this light has on it, for example, let's start with RGB, red, green, blue, RGB, right? So the trick is RGB, each one of those would be a different channel. So that's something to, okay, so RGB, the red would be a channel, the green would be a channel, and the blue would be a channel. And if this light had like a strobing effect, that would be another channel. And if this light was a pan and a tilt, each would be its own channel. If this light showed stars or skulls, each one is a channel. So when you're addressing, if it has 10 channels, well then you'll address them 10 apart. RGB A, or red, green, blue, amber, so that would be 4 channels. Alright, so let's say 4 channels. And then, so this light has 4 channels as well. So when you're addressing them, instead of light 1 and light 2, it would be light 1, and then this would be light 4, right? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this would be 5, 6, 7, 8. So you address this at 1, and this at 5. If you address both at 1, they'll both act the same, okay? And if you address this at like 3, then they'll crisscross and kind of act wonkily. So basically addressing them separately gives you independent range of, because they're all going through the same cable, right? They're all in the same universe. So you're daisy chaining one to the other. The only way to separate the lights know and the board is able to tell them is by having different addresses. Make any sense? I think I wrote that down right. Yeah. So let's say you have your RGB. This light has RGB and a strobe. So that's 4. Let's round it off to 5. RGB W, let's say white. So it's red, green, blue, and white, and a strobe. That's 5, right? Say 5 there, right? So when you're going over to a board like this, which is less sophisticated than, say, you know, a hog or anything on a computer, really. So instead of just this light turns up one light and this turns up another light, it's going to be basically this turns up the red on that one, this turns up the blue, this turns up the green, this turns. So each one would control its own thing. And if you see, like, every board has different, like, there's 2 pages and you get like up to 16, and you can make groups. So you could go 1, 2, 3, 5 for this light are all here, right? And then the other 3 would be on the other page. But then you can group them so that each has their own identity and space in the board when you're programming it. I think I kept that kind of simple, but so the idea is out of the board you're running data to this light, then going to the other light from there. So you're just going to be controlling all those lights on one universe using this board and the addresses appropriately. Make any sense? So you'll see one of the number DMX 512. 512 is the amount of channels in a 5 standard. So the industry standard for DMX is the DMX 5 pin for lighting. And the idea is, so the 3-pin XLR, which you'll still see used in like wedding DJs or even just, you know, lower end bands that are just starting out, or, you know, LDs who just, you know, I ain't got a bankroll, I gotta go work with what I got. I can still make it work, so why not use what I can? But for your bigger rated shows and your higher, you know, you're gonna go with the 5-pin DMX. The 3-pin is kind of basically the old XLRs that you would see for just music, you know, for sound, for microphones or whatever. And because the industry started back when it was, that's what the cables were, and that's what XLR first was. 5-pin DMX is more concise. You can send data in more precise ways so that it can tell the lights what to do, especially if you've got, you know, like a big, you know, moving light may have 35 channels and you have 20 moving lights and you got to give all that information. So each strand of 5-pin DMX has 512 channels. So you could have up to 512 bits of information on that universe or through that cable. So if that light does, if this light does 5 and that light does 5, well, that's 10. So now you have 502. And then the next light, if you have a big mover and it's like 78 channels, and so on and so forth and so on. So while you're addressing them, you also have to keep in mind how many lights you're using in your string. Make sense? I think it does. Now also with these lights, this is like intelligent lighting. So, you know, your big movers, the big lights, well, that's all intelligent lighting. And basically the idea is boards today have, a lot of the boards come with the updated versions of those lights. So you don't have to program in the red, the blue, and the whatever. You could say, like, this is a Chauvet DJ light or whatever, the Easy Wedge Tri. So when you get a good board, not this pile of crap, but let's say you get a good board, it'll have in there, or you could upload the software to update the kind of light this is, and it'll communicate with the light. You program it in and say, hey, this is the light I'm using, and now it has all the functions already pre-programmed in there, which is a big help. If not, you got to sit there and program everything in, and it's a pain in said nards. The other thing about lighting, so that's for intelligent light. So now A light like this, for example, a PAR can, you just get the big parabolic reflector. The idea, they call it a PAR, it's actually a pirate light, the PAR. Alright, so a light like this, for example, this is just power, but a way to look at it, it's just a regular bulb in here, okay? There's nowhere to plug data in, DMX, there's no way to give it information. There's nothing to inform other than on and off. You want to bring the light up and you want to bring the light down like you would on a dimmer. So what you would have to do is, or a fader I should say, so this has to plug into something that you can control. If I just plug it into the wall, it's just going to turn on 100% and I have to unplug it to turn off. There's no on and off switch. So when you see like an ETC rack or a dimmer rack, insert picture here, Ed, something like that, or you might see a little dimmer pack, something like you could plug into like 6 lights, let's say. Something like, yeah. You're basically just plugging it into there, and all those things are is a way to get data in. The DMX will go into the rack and then distribute the information as you need so that you can bring this light up or bring this light down based on that. Some of the dimmer racks, for example, the more portable compact ones, you could actually program in there to make it a full a continuous circuit so that it could be used for intelligent lighting. Let's skip over that. But for lights like these, you're going to have the bulb in there and that's what it is, and you'll add gel to give it the color that you want. Good thing about actual bulbs, for example, as opposed to LED, is when you put in the gel, the colors are more full. It's truer blues, truer reds. Right now, LED technology doesn't quite capture it 100%. But that's a whole other ball of annoying wax. So you may be saying to yourself, hey Ed, but I've seen movers and whatever plugged into these big racks as well. The reason for that is you actually can plug in an intelligent light or one of these lights into a rack. Like for the big ETC racks, for example, you can pull out the brain and you can literally put in consistent circuit racks so you can keep it steady. You wouldn't have your TV on a dimmer because it would kind of short out the TV. Is it on? Is it off? You don't want a TV on 30%. It's going to blow your TV. So that's kind of the idea behind intelligent lighting and movers. The light coming on and coming off comes from the data. So you just need consistent power to that light, constant power, if you will. You wouldn't really plug that into a rack that's a dimmer. So something like the PARs would plug into there, and that's how you dim up and down. But you can replace the brain, you can replace circuits so that they are the constant or consistent circuits so that they get the constant power they need, and you can still control them as is. Even some actually racks, you can program it in so that it is a full on circuit. Still a little wonky, you don't want to do that too much because what if it goes out in the middle of a show and now you're just screwing up your light by going up and down. But anyway, that's the basics of that. When it comes to lighting, like I learned in filmmaking and I learned a lot of DIY filmmaking. You know, one of the things that is kind of important to know in the job is actually knowing the terminology that's used in the industry you're in. Because I've worked in film, I've worked on stage production, like theatrical stage productions, and then rock and roll. There's all different terminology of different things. One of the things you can learn though, because I learned through film, it's way more, at least I found, more precise in terms of how you're lighting one subject for one scene, one moment, whereas you get into rock and roll and it's like, you know, and in theater it's like you're accentuating key scenes and key moments, but it's not as precise as film. But one of the things you can get into, which is kind of cool, is, you know, and which I carry with me when I'm lighting shows, is learning the psychology of different colors and how they affect human beings, you know? And I have my own theories on that, and everybody should, because ultimately you're growing and learning and changing every day. But, you know, some red light's going to affect people one way, blue light's going to affect another way. So it's not just accentuating the music you're seeing, it's also the mood and tone you want to create. That's something I learned in filmmaking that I also try to incorporate into concerts. Anything that I'm lighting, I always try to keep that in mind so that I'm helping enhance the show and the mood overall. That's the coolest part about lighting for concerts and stuff, is that, like I said, I heard somebody who did sound and lighting both a lot. And he said sound is more of a science, whereas lighting is more of an art, and you're creating more with it. You're doing more during the show. You're getting to be more creative, whereas with sound, you're there making sure everything sounds good, you know? So that's the beauty of it, and it's a lot of fun. And you know, knowing kind of just a little bit of the glimpse of how things are addressed knowing about a universe, just the basics of that. The next time you go on set, that's how I was going to say. The next time you go on a gig, on a stage, and you're helping just some lighting designer hang up a light, pay attention to where it's plugged in with the data, where data goes, and then pay attention to where the power goes. You know, power is another thing. It's a big thing. When I first, got into this business, I was learning about how to program a board, and I was super excited that I knew how to program the board and how to daisy it. Woo! I felt so good, proud of myself. And my production manager said, right, but that's only a small portion of it. You got to learn about power. And that's the other part of it that's kind of a big deal. Knowing electricity, for example, is just a big deal. You need to know, like you'll get in, we have 10, 20 amp circuits in this theater. So you can plug 10, 20, if somebody comes in with light, you have 10, 20 amp circuits. So you need to know, like how much does this light produce? How much does that light, so you can do the math in your head, and ultimately how much amperage is coming out, how many volts or watts are coming out of the building, like out of the actual box itself. Me, growing up, I worked in a lot of movie theaters, and that was manager of a movie theater, and I had to know and have talked with a lot of electricians about the place was a mess, because the thing that you learn, why every venue has the LD, or really the ME, the master electrician. You have somebody who knows the ins and outs of that specific building. Because while lighting is all, like, you can kind of get the gist of everything, every building is specific, not just in how we rig, like, oh, this light here, that light there, that's our, but also this light, the electricity coming out of this box is like 75 years old, and it sucks power from the building next door. You know what I mean? Like, stupid shit like that shouldn't happen, but it does. And that's why you have people there that are steady and know the electric work and understand how that stuff affects other things. ME, master electrician, but in smaller venues or in venues or companies, they'll be the same person. So my LD that day for that show should also know a lot about electricity and where it's coming from in that building, so that when a guest comes in, they know exactly, like, oh, you have this kind of lights, here is the power I'm giving you from this circuit. You should know where it's coming from, what it's plugging into, and if you're overloading anything, or if you have to shut off another breaker to get extra power. So that's kind of the gist of it. I think I kept it in layman's terms and simple. If not, I guess I could do more about programming or something next time, or whatever. I'm big on filmmaking, and I like specifics of lighting and trying to get it dialed in really nice. But there's something really cool and liberating about lighting an entire show. Incorporating what the artist wants on stage, or a band you've never met before who came in and they're like, well, we want this kind of vibe and this kind of, and it's a really cool way to go in the business if you're looking to kind of move forward. And you can actually learn a lot by working with other people, and that's kind of something that I kind of had to remind myself I was going through, because it can be, this business can be pretty competitive, but it is an artisan business. That's the thing. I mean, we're not, this ain't ancient Greece or whatever, but the idea is you are learning from those above you. Everybody has a mentor in some capacity or other, and so you do your homework, you study a little bit, you go on the next gig, whatever that gig is, somebody who knows it seems like they know what they're talking about, hopefully they're not a jerk, and they're going to want to teach you a little bit, and you're going to learn, and you're going to go forward, and you just keep doing it until eventually you don't suck anymore, which is my motto in life. Alright, that's all I got. Hope it helped.